Well, I show it's 6 o'clock this Tuesday evening, March 19th, and time for the regular meeting of the Oak Harbor City Council to come to order. We do work off an agenda. We've got copies of the agenda in the back. And turning to the council, any corrections, any tweaking, adjusting to the agenda as presented? If not, we'll go ahead and work with that agenda as presented. And on our agenda, we have a Pledge of Allegiance that's also going to be followed by an invocation that'll be given by Pastor Andy Mahoney with Grace Community Church. So please join me in the pledge. Pastor Andy Mahoney.
Let's pray. Lord, you are the Prince of Peace. You are the one who comforts those who mourn. You yourself experience loss, grief, suffering, even death. You know us inside and out, and you know exactly what this community is experiencing right now with the tragic loss of these 3 pilots. Lord, your word says that you are a father to the fatherless and a defender of widows. We thank you that you are exactly who you say you are, and you do everything that you say you will do. And we pray that you will continue to make yourself known to these families in this way. We thank you for the price that these pilots paid for our freedom. We thank you for the countless others that put their lives on the line every day to protect the freedoms that we so often take for granted. The freedom to be involved in government, the freedom from tyrannical and oppressive forms of government that shut mouths rather than inviting civil discourse, the freedom to worship in our churches and gather publicly to honor the fallen in the best ways that we know how. I thank you that we all have the freedom to worship any way we choose, free from fear of persecution. We do not take that freedom for granted. It is a gift that you have given this nation, and we thank you for those who defend it so bravely. I thank you for Oak Harbor and our council and mayor who thanklessly serve it. Give them wisdom, give them insight, give them patience, give them a sense of the gratitude that so many of us have for them. Lord, we recognize the sacrifice of their time and energy and ask that you would bless them in return. I thank you for our public servants, our firemen, our policemen, our nonprofits, our countless volunteers who work day after day to make Oak Harbor a better and safer place for all of us who live in it. Watch over them and their families. Protect their lives in danger for ours. Lord, you alone are worthy of all the praise, all the glory, and all the honor. Bless this council meeting and make your face shine upon our beautiful city. In your name we pray. Amen.
Thank you, Pastor Andy Mahoney with Grace Community Church for that invocation. This evening, stepping in for our city clerk is our own Kathy Gifford, and I'll turn to Kathy at this time for our roll call.
Mr. Pagao,
Present.
Mr. Omberg,
Present.
Mr. Campbell,
Present.
Ms. Munns,
Present.
Mr. Silvadius,
Present.
Ms. Heisen,
Present.
and Mr. Severance.
Present.
Thank you, Ms. Gifford. In your packets, you have the minutes from the regular city council meeting that was held on March 5th. Any changes, corrections to the minutes from our last city council meeting? Hearing none, we'll go ahead and enter those as presented. At this time, we'll go ahead and bring our Public Works Director, Ms. Kathy Rosen, up to the podium because it looks like we have a recognition of Mr. Hank Nydam's 30 years of service.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council. Hank, why don't you come on up? Hank began his employment with the City of Oak Harbor on March 7th, 1983 as a Utility 1 in the Parks Division, and he was promoted to groundskeeper in August of 1988. And not even a year later, he was promoted to heads groundkeeper. He's a highly motivated employee. Throughout his 30 years, he's remained highly motivated. And he is just very, very committed and dedicated to this community. In his current position as Parks Manager, he directs 6 full-time employees, and they are responsible for the maintenance of all of the city parks, open spaces, and the facilities grounds. And they also operate the Stay Sail RV Park and the kitchen facilities at Windjammer Park. It's a lot of work for Hank and those 6 employees, and they do a great job and keep our city looking beautiful. Hank works really well with community groups on city beautification projects and works with the scouting organizations on Eagle Scout projects and other community volunteer projects. He works very closely with the youth leagues and in organizing the way that the city's sports fields are used. And he's the staff representative to the park board and works very closely with the Chamber of Commerce and other local service organizations to coordinate the many special events that are held in our city parks. One of Hank's greatest achievements, I think, since he's been with the city has been the development of Fort Nugent Park, which was a 10-year project. And now we have, the several sports fields out there, the walking trail, the Frisbee golf course, which was, Hank was very passionate about getting that Frisbee golf course. The concession stand and a really fun project, I think, although it's the only time I've ever seen Hank stress, was the community-built playground out at Fort Nugent Park. Hank has got just such an even keel, calm temperament, and he did a little bit of pacing around on that project, but he sometimes has to face some very difficult situations, very limited resources, but he does it with a great sense of humor and commitment to this community, and he's just really a tremendous asset for the city to have as an employee, and I am proud to give him his and congratulate him on his 30 years.
Okay, Mr. Needham, you got to step up to the microphone and tell us your observations over the last 30 years. Is it all a blur? Or?
Well, you know what? It goes by fast, very fast. But it's been an honor and a pleasure serving the city of Oak Harbor, working for the city of Oak Harbor. And I'm thankful for the opportunity. Lots of changes that we've seen over the 30 years. Met a lot of great people throughout the community and groups that, like the park board, have gotten to know those folks pretty well, and a lot of the council members over the years. And so, yeah, it's been a very rewarding career, 30 years. So thank the city of Oak Harbor for their support all these years for the parks in Oak Harbor. So thank you.
Well, speaking of support, who do we have in the audience?
Well, I brought my wife, Teddy,
Thank you.
right over there.
Well, thank you on behalf of the city of Oak Harbor, thank you for your 30 years of service. And at this time, I think yes, I think it would be appropriate.
I would like to give my favorite person a big cheer, but first I want to tell him, I thought that you were 30 years old. Let's hear it for Hank Needham. Hip hip. Hooray! Hip hip. Hooray! Hip hip. Hooray!
Okay. At this time, we're going to take a 30-second break so we can come down there and thank you for your 30 years of service. So we'll be in recess so we can come shake your hand.
What will we ever do without Helen?
Okay, at this time, we'll go ahead and reconvene this regular meeting of the Oak Harbor City Council, and it's time for citizens' comment period. This is the public comment period. Anyone wishing to address the city council on matters within the jurisdiction of the city and are not on the agenda may do so now. You may speak to any of the consent agenda items. Matters not appearing on the city council's agenda will not receive action this evening, but may be referred to staff for a future meeting. Presentations are going to be limited to 3 minutes. You'll hear a bell. We're going to ask you to speak into the microphone, but please identify yourself, as this is being recorded, being played back on Channel 10, and being streamed live. So anyone wishing to address the city council can do so now.
Thank you, Mayor Dudley. My name is Melissa Duffy, and my address is 665 Southeast Glencoe Street, Oak Harbor, Washington. And I too want to just put a thank you to Hank Neidham for all of his selfless service. He actually came out Sunday and helped with our new art sculpture storyboard installation at the and brought his son along, working for 3 hours on his day off, and that's the kind of man he is. And he's worked with the Gary Oak Grand Old Garden project since its inception 8 years ago. He's a remarkable citizen and a model to inspiration and a model to all of us. I wanted to invite, I know our mayor here is going to be speaking tomorrow, but personally invite also the city council and the local community as well to attend our special art piece commemoration and dedication tomorrow. And this is a vision that's been long in coming as a creation of a place where people can come and sit and view the beautiful garden that we've created and find some peace and contentment and solace amidst these busy times. So the event will be in front of the post office from 2 to 3. And the carver who created this piece is named Pat McVeigh. He's a local Whidbey Island artist. It's a 14-foot hand-carved cedar storyboard, and the story theme is Oak and Harbor. So it's unique and special art specifically for our town. And I want to invite the local community to name this art piece. Pat McVeigh is going to be giving an award of a small plaque, hand-carved plaque, to winner number 1, and winner numbers 2 and 3 will receive a wood block. So the address is going to be grandgaryoak@gmail.com, or at the post office, there's going to be a jar starting tomorrow afternoon. And if you want to look at the art piece, it's just located just outside of the post office to the left. And think of a name that depicts this whimsical piece of sculpture. Tomorrow will be the first day of spring, and we are going to have also shamrock ties, green shamrock cards. We did that also on March 17th, St. Patty's Day. It will give an opportunity for all in the community to come and pen a wish, a poem, a joke, or a blessing, and we're going to tie it around the old oak tree in combination with the blessings and little wishes that were on St. Patrick's Day. So that'll be part of this celebration as well. This art installation piece was funded entirely by Island Thrift and by Harbor Pride with a donation of $1,000 of in-kind services from Pat McVeigh. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Duffy.
Helen Chatfield Weeks, Oak Harbor, and I just am going to tell you all, you better be there. It is the most beautiful piece of art you can ever imagine, and we are so thrilled. We are so thrilled that one of our very own Whidbey Island artists carved it. So do come at 2 o'clock tomorrow. And I am delighted to say that Melissa is back from California. I have missed her so much, and she knows everything you ever wanted to know about oaks. Thank you for coming back. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Jefferson Weeks. Anyone else? Okay. Seeing none, we'll go ahead and close public comment and turn to our own Miss Kathy Gifford for the reading of our consent agenda items.
Consent agenda item A is motion to approve the accounts payable vouchers in the amount of $208.25, consisting of numbers 153376 through 153378, and in the amount of $530,935.64, consisting of numbers 153379 through 153539. Consent agenda item B is motion to authorize the mayor to sign the contract with Geo Engineers to investigate the North Reservoir site for evidence of an earthquake fault with a not-to-exceed amount of $35,900 and a management reserve of $1,000. Item C is motion to close public hearing to consider revocation of the nightclub license for the Element Nightclub. Agenda item D is motion to set a public meeting on April 2nd, 2013 to consider amending section 2.34.05 of the Oak Harbor Municipal Code relating to management positions. That would be ordinance 1654. Agenda item E is motion to set a public meeting on April 2nd, 2013, to consider suspending the regular meetings of the City Council Standing Committees established under Section 1.04.015 of the Oak Harbor Municipal Code, and that would be ordinance 1656.
Turning to the council, what would the council wish to do with those consent agenda items? Councilmember Campbell.
Make a motion, we accept the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
And you're wishing to accept and approve those consent agenda items. We got a motion from Councilmember Campbell, second by Councilmember Munns. Any further discussion? Okay, seeing none. All those in favor of those consent agenda items signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay, and that passes unanimously. And now it comes the time that we've all been waiting for. We've been looking forward to this night for quite some time. So we're going to bring up our own Director of Development Services, Mr. Steve Powers, for the item which is relating to the keeping of backyard chickens on our second reading and possible adoption. Mr. Powers.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. Let me start by saying I made a promise to Dr. Court. So, this item is before you this evening for its second reading and possible adoption. I don't anticipate that there'll be a staff presentation this evening. I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have. I will make one note for you, which was we were able to shorten the ordinance from the last time with the city attorney's assistance. We were able to eliminate all of the definitions that were in there with the exception of the one that needed to be changed. So it shortened the ordinance by about 15 pages, I think. So I think we made some progress there. And our recommended action to you is that you adopt ordinance 1652, allowing the keeping of backyard chicken hens. Thank you.
This time we will turn to the public and see if anyone wishes to have public comment in the public hearing for this ordinance, possible adoption. And we ask you, speaking to the microphone, you have 3 minutes.
Proud Oak Harbor resident, Shane Hoffmeyer. Proud Oak Harbor resident, Shane Hoffmeyer. I spoke at the previous council meeting of the real irony with how out of step certain laws are with common sense. You have laws making things that should be illegal, legal, such as a law in Michigan that says anyone over the age of 12 may purchase a handgun so long as he or she hasn't committed a felony. Then on the other end of this spectrum, you have laws making things that should be legal, illegal. Take, for instance, a North Carolina law that makes it illegal to play bingo for more than 5 hours. These laws are wacky, and it doesn't stop here. This list of foul laws, laws that say you can't serve beer and pretzels together, and you can't call a pickle if it doesn't bounce. This list is endless, and I would personally argue that an Oak Harbor ordinance making it illegal for its citizens to own a few hens certainly fits into this category of laws that are needless and lack any common sense. This ordinance prepared by staff is a good one. Allowing property owners to have up to 6 hens on their property would be a good decision and speaks of a less intrusive government. 6 or fewer properly cared for hens are nearly odorless, nearly silent, and they are a great asset as they rid your yard of weeds and bugs. These little critters are worth their weight in gold as they can provide your family with healthy organic food and teach our youth respect and compassion, along with so many other life's lessons, lessons and values that I would argue are missing from today's society. I am the owner of 3 hens, and really, yeah, they are pets, so part of our family. So I ask this council, please vote to approve this ordinance, and please vote to allow my family and so many other families to remain whole. One last thing. With the fact that chickens are already legal in Olympia, Tacoma, Seattle, Marysville, Coupeville, and most other towns and cities in the Pacific Northwest, it would appear crystal clear that if chickens and human beings can coexist in all of these places, then we certainly can do the same here in Little Oak Harbor. The Seattle metropolitan area has nearly 4 million residents. If chickens are suitable pets in the 15th largest metropolitan area in the nation, then surely they are suitable pets on Whidbey Island. And I'd like to thank you all for your time, and that's all I got. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Hoffmeyer. Anyone else wishing to comment?
Mr. Mayor, council members, good evening. My name is Larry Eaton, 429 Southwest Dyer Street. I wish I could be as light as the previous speaker about why I think it's important to approve the chicken ordinance. Some might accuse me of being maybe too much of a news hound because I know everything that's going on. I understand the markets in Europe. I understand what's happening in Cyprus right now. I understand the job unemployment very clearly in our time, and I understand just exactly what's happening to our very seriously economically depressed nation and global markets. So my real reason for this, having the ability of citizens of Oak Harbor to raise chickens, is more than just that. I think it's a nice thing to do. It's a wonderful thing to do to teach our children how to raise animals and to husband them correctly. And what those chickens give us. But more than that, I've learned too, as well as you have, that when disasters strike us, governments simply fail us. We've seen that in Katrina, we've seen that with Sandy, and we've seen that in so many other instances. So my idea of having an ordinance which allows for folks in Oak Harbor in particular, and if I were in another city, it would be there as well, that they have the ability to do some things on their own that will help them in maybe small ways, in ways right now, I think in anticipation of some more serious things that personally and sadly and maybe gloom and doom, I think are awaiting us, because I just see things as I just see a storm gathering. And so my reason is not quite as light as Mr. Shane here about why we should have chickens, but mine is a little bit more fundamental and primary. So I would ask that you approve that this ordinance, that it pass, that folks who want to take the initiative raise chickens, maybe for meat, maybe for the eggs, maybe both, and maybe add to all of that mix maybe their own farms as well, their little victory farms, I like to call them. So with that, I'd like to thank you and wish you well, and thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Eaton. Anyone else wishing to comment?
My name is still Melissa Duffy, and my address is still 665 Southeast Glencoe Street, Oak Harbor. And my only thought was about the avian flu virus, just that precautions be taken to prevent any kind of pandemic or issues of infection. But otherwise, I'd say yes on the chicken ordinance.
Thank you, Ms. Duffy. Anyone else? Okay, seeing none, we'll go ahead and close public comment. Turn to the City Council, bring back our Director of Development Services, Mr. Powers, and starting off with Councilmember Heisen.
No questions.
Okay, Councilmember Severns.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Powers, could you tell us everything you know about the avian flu virus?
Won't take me very long, Mr. Severns. I think I'm done.
Okay. Now, I'm sure that is a very valid concern. I think the other cities, I'm hoping, have studied that to some degree, so.
My assumption, Mr. Severance, in a slightly more serious response, is that should that become an issue on the island, we would have guidance from our county health department, which acts as our own health department in that case, and through their chief health officer. They would be giving us guidance.
Thank you, Mr. Powers. No more questions.
Councilmember Romberg.
No questions.
Mayor Pro Tem Pagal.
No question, Your Honor.
Councilmember Campbell.
Avian influenza is an infection caused by an avian bird, not necessarily just chickens. A virus, it's a virus. These influenza A viruses occur naturally among birds. Wild birds worldwide get the infection, mostly wild birds. I don't have any other questions.
Councilmember Munns.
No question.
And Councilmember Savidius.
I move to adopt ordinance 1652.
Second.
We got a motion from Councilmember Savidius, second by Councilmember Allenberg, to adopt ordinance 1652. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of adopting ordinance 1652 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? That passed unanimously. We have chickens.
Thank you, council.
We're going to leave our Director of Development Services, Mr. Powers, up at the podium for our next agenda item. Mr. Powers.
Mayor, members of the council, thank you. The next ordinance is an introduction to the council this evening. And this particular ordinance is one which would change the composition of the Marina Advisory Committee by increasing the size of the committee from 5 members to 7 members. As you see in your agenda bill, we've given you the basic authority citation as we typically do. Under the summary statement, remind you of what the Marina Advisory Committee does for you. Their purpose is to advise the mayor and council concerning matters that affect the marina. It's currently, in its current composition, it was established with the adoption of Ordinance 1541 in 2008. That ordinance set the number of members at 5 and established certain membership criteria. Increasing the size of that committee could lead to better policy advice or additional policy advice to the mayor and to the council in your running of the marina. And so the draft ordinance that was attached to your agenda bill proposes to increase the membership from 5 to 7. As you saw by reviewing your materials, it also put those 2 new members in the category which provides the greatest latitude for the mayor and council to appoint those members. This item was presented to the Government Services Standing Committee at their March 12th meeting. And your recommended action this evening is you set the public meeting date for April 2nd, 2013.
Thank you, Mr. Powers. At this time, we'll turn to the public and see if anyone wishes to comment regarding this agenda item. You can do so now. Okay. Seeing none, we'll go ahead and close public comment, bring back our Director of Development Services, Mr. Powers, and turn to the council, starting with Councilmember Savidius.
Thank you. I wasn't able to be at the March 12th meeting, so this question might have been asked, but the first question I would have is why the increase?
It was the mayor's idea to look at expanding the committee to, again, I think just provide a greater number of voices in helping to establish the policies.
Okay. And the only thing that stood out to me was it looks like the 2, I'm looking at section 239030. If we add 2 more positions, they need not be customers of the facility, correct?
Yes, as presently drafted, yes.
Okay. I'll see if anyone else has any comment. I almost think I would want input from clients of the marinas to what they would like to see, but that's all I have at this moment.
Okay. Councilmember Munns.
I guess, Mr. Mayor, this question's for you. What's your vision to make it larger? I mean, it seems to be working well with 5, and to my knowledge, the harbor master or the committee itself, is there a representative that this would be a good idea to expand it, or what's your vision? I guess I would like to know, please.
Well, I think, going back to Councilmember Savidius' question, what are we trying to accomplish? Obviously, with the increase in size, what we're wanting to do is make it bigger, better, bolder, have more input, and draw from more individuals than less. because of the lack of restrictions on the 2 added positions, does that mean that we're just going to grab individuals from at large? No. Actually, what I'd like to do is take a look and say, of those on the Marina Advisory Committee now, how many represent those that are liveaboard? Currently, it's 0. Can we have some representation from on that side as well? And so when it comes to my vision is to see what we can do from the Marina Advisory Committee side to create a vision from the Marina Advisory Committee on what we can do to improve the marina. Right now, we're looking at installing the Wi-Fi. We're looking at improving the lighting down there. But I think that there's more and more that we can do to make Oak Harbor even more attractive to those that are wishing to boat here.
Okay, that's reasonable. Then I guess because it's the local taxpayers and it's the revenue. Enterprise revenue, that I'd rather see 5 members that are Oak Harbor residents or own their own business, which would cover having liveaboards because they're Oak Harbor residents, than to say it's 3 outside anywhere in the state of Washington to be members. I would rather see it be 5 and then 2 from outside of our area. Instead of, because right now as it's written, you would have 3 from outside and 4 inside residents or local business owners.
If I could, Ms. Munns, while let's look at just how the existing ordinance reads, which is the 5-member committee, and it allowed for 1 member shall reside in the state of Washington, and then there's the ones which are the marina customers and the one which is not the marina customer. Presently, if I recall correctly, all of our existing members, up until the most recent appointment, were either city residents or owned a business within the city. And so we have not taken advantage of that sort of that 5th, for lack of a better word, floating member. Sorry. Thank you. I didn't promise on this one, Dr. Quart. I'm sorry.
You didn't run afoul.
I did. And so I think what it's really there is to provide some flexibility to the mayor and to the council. And another reason why you might want to consider some input from members of the community, the broader community, who aren't necessarily mortgage customers, is, if you recall, the Marina Redevelopment Program includes not only improvements to the waterside facilities, but it also contemplates upland improvements. And part of the grander vision is that those upland improvements would support the broader community and not necessarily just the marina. So you may wish to have somebody who brings a particular viewpoint, maybe from Parks and Recreation, or maybe a particular business viewpoint, into your committee as we continue to march along that path of implementing that bigger vision. So I think what it really does is just provide you some flexibility.
Okay,
Well, good question.
I've never heard you say, so I was just curious. Thank you.
Okay. Councilmember Campbell.
Thank you. I think there comes a point in any committee where you can get too many people and it becomes unmanageable. However, I don't think 7 is unmanageable. I think the talent that you could have there could give the marina a very good asset and very good input. Thank you very much.
Mayor Pro Tem Pagal.
No question, Your Honor.
Councilmember Ellenberg.
You know, the problem that I have with the distribution of representation here is that we've changed it from the 5th member, 1 member, from any place in the state of Washington to 3 members. And, you know, I don't have so much of a problem with the 7 versus the 5. It's just the disproportionate representation from any place in the state. Why did we come up with that formula that allows 3 out of 7 to be in Sunnyside or Spokane or Walla Walla?
Well, Mr. Ellenberg, frankly, it was based on the previous code, which had the 4 and the 1. Okay, so as you can see by looking at the strikeout language, that under the existing code, 4 of the Marina Advisory Committee members either reside in or own businesses within the Oak Harbor city limits. that fifth member recognized that we might have somebody who lives in the county, just outside of our city limits, who would be a great contributing member to the marina. Maybe they were a longtime marina tenant and for some reason are not a marina tenant now. And so I think that's why that fifth member was set as being just outside. You didn't have to have a business interest or reside within the city to serve on the committee. And at the time, as we drafted that code, we just chose the state of Washington. From a practical matter, would the mayor appoint and would the council confirm somebody from Yakima? Unless they had a real reason to be doing that, I would imagine that wouldn't be the case.
Okay,
But again, draft ordinance being introduced
Yeah.
this evening, we're obviously looking for the council's feedback and direction. And, you know, this was the first proposal.
I would be more inclined to support it if it said Island County, as opposed to the state of Washington. If we're going to change it, let's change it so it reflects what you just described.
Certainly, it's a great comment. One of the things we do at the staff when we're trying to revise an existing ordinance is we try to revise as little as possible and leave that existing language in place. But if the council finds that existing language isn't going to suit your needs going into the future, well, then I think that's certainly fair game as well.
Okay, I'm not going to keep picking on this one. Move on.
Councilmember Severance.
Thank you, Mayor. The only comment I have is that of the existing 5 members, I happened to talk to 2 of them over the weekend, and they were, I guess, surprised by this. I'd be interested to know what the present committee feels. So perhaps they could come to the next meeting, or we could get a recommendation from them.
The scheduling of this, Mr. Severance, would allow us to be at the Marina Advisory Committee on April 1st.
Great.
And then be able to share their input with you at your April 2nd meeting, assuming that you set April 2nd as the date for the next meeting.
That's good.
Yeah.
Thanks. That's all I have.
Councilmember Heisen.
Thank you, Mayor. I think I tend to agree with the general sentiment. My initial thought was if it isn't broke, don't fix it. And it seems to be operating just fine. But I'm uncomfortable with having up to 3 members who not only don't live in Oak Harbor, but aren't customers of the marina. That doesn't make any sense to me at all. I like the idea of maybe 1 floating member, as you put it. And if we want to include a liveaboard representation, which I think is a great idea, again, the outside of Oak Harbor and not a marina customer doesn't apply there. So more people, yes, but I definitely like them to have Oak Harbor addresses and be customers of the marina.
Good comments, if I could, just for
Yeah.
all of the council's benefit. Maybe clarify that if you look at section 1, it sets the 4 and the 3 not position specific, right? Whereas, so in other words, your 4 city residents or city business owners versus your 3 non are not tied to specific positions, whereas your customers and your non-customers are tied to specific positions.
Okay.
So you could very well have one of your non-city residents, non-city business owners be a mortgage customer.
Right.
So I just want to make sure the council sees that you don't necessarily end up with somebody outside of the city who is not a marina customer.
Gotcha. So the 2 are mutually exclusive.
They are.
Okay,
Now,
that's
that certainly
comforting.
can happen, but the code is not set that way, is not set up that way.
Okay, that makes sense. I wouldn't be opposed to, say, if we had someone that came in, moored, and lived in the marina 6 months out of the year that maybe didn't live in Oak Harbor the rest of the time. Something like that would definitely make sense to me. So I would like to hear from the Marina Committee. From what I understand, they didn't know anything about this and hadn't expressed a need for this. So I would definitely like to hear their take on it.
Yeah, absolutely. They're scheduled to be on their agenda for their very next meeting.
Okay, so April 2nd. Do we need a motion on this, or will it automatically go on this?
We'll need a motion to set that meeting date for April 2nd.
So moved.
You got a motion from
Second.
Councilmember Heisen, second from Councilmember Munns.
Mhm.
Okay. Any further discussion? Councilmember Campbell.
Do we need a motion for Mr. Omberg's change to living in Island County?
It didn't sound like he was going to push the issue, but I'll,
Do we need that, do we need a motion?
if he was going to amend, no, but in this case, at this point, we're just setting the public meeting date.
Okay.
Yeah. And so,
I think staff has gotten some valuable feedback this evening from the council discussion. I think we'll probably look at making some tweaks to the proposed ordinance. Again, review those with the Marina Advisory Committee and be prepared to have this in front of you for your April 2nd meeting.
we got a motion on the floor, which is to set that public meeting date for April 2nd. Any further discussion? All those in favor of setting that public meeting date for April 2nd signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay, that passes
Thank you.
unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Powers. And looking at our agenda, looks like we have our HR manager, Ms. Cheryl Lawler, coming forward for our next agenda item. Ms. Lawler.
Mayor and Council, I would like to propose Agenda Bill Number 4 for Resolution 1307 to amend the wellness program as outlined in our employee policy manual. When the program was initiated, it did not spell out that our paid-on-call volunteers, firefighters, were eligible for a membership fee incentive, which they have been historically. So to clarify that, we would like to amend the program to distinctly call them out as eligible to participate in the incentive. And the second amendment would be, there's a correction to the wording on that second amendment, so if you want to indicate that on your copy of Resolution 1307, and that is to clarify that the number of hours earned by regular employees for the Wellness Day Off will be prorated according to the average hours worked by regular employees. It's not non-regular, it's regular employees. And the reason for the clarification is when it has been discussed, there was confusion about whether part-time employees would earn up to would earn the 8 hours or not for the Wellness Day Off. And so that's the reason for the clarification. So it's prorated based upon how many hours, regular hours, that employee works, is the recommendation behind that.
Okay, then at this time, we'll go ahead and turn to the public and see if anyone who wishes to comment in reference to this agenda item, they can do so now. Seeing none, we'll go ahead and close public. Bring back our HR manager up to the podium, turn to the council, starting with Councilmember Heisen.
I have no questions.
Councilmember Severns.
No questions.
Councilmember Umberg.
Thank you, Mayor. We have a exercise room that's designated for exercise and equipment at the fire department. At least at times I've been there, they had that facility in there. Do they still have that exercise facility? Yes. Okay. Do they use it?
Oh, yes.
And they also use the private fitness clubs and stuff at the same time where they do that?
You do?
They do.
Yes, sir, they do.
They do. Okay. That's all I have.
Mayor Pro Tem Pagal.
No question, Your Honor.
Councilmember Campbell.
No questions.
Councilmember Munns.
No questions.
And Councilmember Sevedius.
I move to approve resolution number 13-07, amending Appendix D in the Employee Policy Manual.
Second.
Do we need the adjustments, the correction?
We need the adjustments for the second amendment to exclude the word non-regular, leaving it as regular in both the second line and the third line.
Page number you're looking at?
I'm
89?
looking at
Page 89.
92.
page 89, I believe it is, in your council packet.
All right, so striking or replacing,
Just
Striking the word non in front of regular,
okay.
which is used twice.
Let's give this a bash again. I move to approve resolution number 1307, striking the word non in the two respective places, and amending Appendix D otherwise in the Employee Policy Manual.
Second.
Okay, we had a motion by Councilmember Sevedius, second by Councilmember Campbell. Any further discussion? All those in favor of adopting resolution number 13-07 as amended signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay, that passed unanimously. Thank you, Ms. Lawler. This time we'll bring up our city engineer, Mr. Joe Stoll, for our next agenda item. Mr. Stoll.
Mayor, council members, thank you for having me here tonight. My first agenda bill tonight is the submittal of the draft facilities plan to Department of Ecology. I've brought a copy of it here with me in case anybody hasn't had a chance to take a look.
Oh, gee.
It's substantial. This is really the report. The rest of it is attachments that cover all the background. And this is the light reading one. This is the executive summary that goes over it in some detail. But my presentation, I'll try to hit some of the high points so that we kind of know. This is a big milestone for the city. It's been a little while getting here, and it's a big milestone in the project itself. So the background to why we even did a facilities plan is in January of 2009, we received a sewer plan that indicated the need for a new treatment plant. In August of 2010, Corolla was selected to develop that facilities plan, which is necessary. It's a necessary part of state law, really, before you can build a treatment plant, you have to do the facilities plan for it. And today we're here to get your approval to submit it to Department of Ecology, and that they're the regulatory agency on that. So why do we need a facilities plan? The existing treatment plants are outdated and nearing capacity. That was the starter for it. There's increasingly stringent water quality standards that are always getting more stringent as we go along. Both outfalls have major problems. One of them has completely failed, and the other is in disrepair. And the marsh surrounding the lagoons was reclaimed for salmon habitat in 2009, and it threatens the stability of our lagoons, lagoon plant out on the seaplane base. And and with all this, it was actually incorporated into our permit that we have through the state for operation of the treatment plant. And, Brian does this. Brian Matson with Corolla is here with me today, but he likes to hit on some of the goals, and I'm going to try and hit on some of those too. The goals of this facilities plan is to provide a reliable wastewater treatment plant, meet high water quality standards, provide phasing opportunities so that we can look at ways to implement this in steps to reduce the cost to us and the community. And one of the other project goals is to keep on track for the ultimate goal of having the new treatment plant online by the end of 2017. So what are the components of the facility plan? It's a large document. I thought it'd be important to hit on some of the highlights of it. The chapter 1 is just the introduction, pretty much what I've just gone over with you. It sets the stage for what the facilities plan is. Chapter 2 gets into the planning areas, existing and future service areas, and the land use and zoning for those areas. And there's a touch in there on stormwater management, and that's what that really has to do with is we don't want stormwater entering our sewers because that means we have to treat stormwater like wastewater. It's an expensive proposition, and you really don't want that. So it looks at ways we can reduce that, and we are doing that on a regular basis. And then Chapter 3 is the existing facilities that we have. What is the current status of our RBC and lagoon plants and our existing collection system? It's just a snapshot of where we are. Chapter 4 goes into the flows and loads, and that's kind of, they sound like they should be the same thing, but they're really not. Flows are, the quantity, the volume of water that's moved. The loads is the biological material and other things that you find in that flow. And so we're looking at the historic flows and loads up to today, and then what we might project for the future, because as you know, with new with new environmental responsibility, you have low flow toilets, higher loads and lower flows that get as new homes are added. Chapter 5 goes into the regulatory requirements. It goes in, there's a whole host of regulatory requirements to go along with this. It's everything that has to do with the environmental side of it.
And you're done.
Am I talking past my 3 minutes? Chapter 6 is alternatives development, and this is setting the stage for the alternatives. What processes do we want to use, whether it's membrane or activated sludge or some other? What effluent discharge options we might have, where it might go. And just kind of started where some potential sites might be. Which takes us into 7, which is the proposed alternatives. And the map's a little bit hard to read. I got a better view of it if we want to show that later. But this is the slide that has the 6 sites on it. As you remember, we went from 13 to 5 to 6 to 2 to 1. It was kind of a trek to get here. But this is the one that's included in the facilities plan. And then Chapter 8 moves on to the recommended alternative. And this graphic here was developed during the SHARET process with community members, and it shows what the potential is for a wastewater treatment plant in Windjammer vicinity. Once again, it doesn't mean that that's where it's going. That's to be decided. It means that it's going in the Windjammer vicinity, but it doesn't mean that it's going on that particular. This is just a nice picture of what improvements we could do with our community using the treatment plant as a catalyst. And then Chapter 9 is what we delved into detail at the workshop. It's the funding sources and the impact on monthly rates. There's no need to delve into that too much. We went into that in plenty of detail at the workshop. So what's the schedule look like now that we have this thing submitted? What does that mean? Well, what we have is this graphics come up a couple times, but what we have is the facilities plan. There are the bars in green. And that's where we are today, March 19th. That conditional approval in July 2013, what that means is Department of Ecology. We're hoping that they'll have the review done by then, and they'll be able to give us a technical okay on the project, that part of it's good. Now the rest of it, this longer line here, for that final approval, that's waiting for the federal and state regulatory agencies, Fish and Wildlife. It takes them a bit longer to go through the review process. What we can do is when we get conditional approval from Department of Ecology, that's kind of the real, more of the green light for us. And we can do some stuff leading up to that, no problem, but that's the real letting the race car go. So funding, I thought it was important to add just a quick slide. There's no money associated with this action tonight. It's already been decided beforehand. This is the result of the efforts we put forward. And just for general information, if you want to see a copy of this for yourself, there's a website set up for the treatment plant. It's oakharborcleanwater.org. Copies, you can download copies. Some of the chapters, as you can imagine, are pretty good size PDFs, but you're welcome to do that and see it for yourself. It's also a copy here at City Hall downstairs. There's one at Public Works, and there's one at the library. And if you care for any more information about it, I'll probably talk your ear off about it because it's something I enjoyed talking about. So feel free to give me a call. My phone number and email address are up there on the board. And with that, I'll move to the council and see if you have any questions.
This time we'll turn to the public and see if there's any public comments in reference to the recommended action in this agenda bill. Seeing none, we'll go ahead and close public comment, bring back our city engineer, turn to the city council, starting with Councilmember Servadius.
No specific questions on this. It truly is a milestone. It's kind of exciting to get here. You said something that intrigued me. It's more for my education. The stormwater, how is that currently diverted or conditioned differently than the wastewater?
Well, you know, way back in the day, storm drain and sewer lines often were the same pipe, and there wasn't much, if any, treatment. And as things progressed, they decided, you know, they felt it was the right thing to do to treat the sewage before it was discharged into the ocean. And with that, you know, it's easier to treat just one and not both. So, like, for example, on Pioneer Way, at one point it had a single pipe that had both going to it, and later a storm drain was added.
Okay.
And what we're looking for is there's still some of those remnants of that old system from time to time that you have to watch out for. That's one part of it. The other is sometimes over the years the pipes don't fit together as good as they used to, and with high groundwater, you get water infiltration into manholes. And we just actually had a program in the past couple months where they went through and we're going to seal up roughly 40 manholes that had some leaks. So it's an ongoing process.
Okay, thank you.
Councilman Munns.
Just a comment, well done to you and your staff in Corolla. Appreciate you keeping the project on time and moving forward very much for your efforts. So thank you very much.
Councilmember Campbell.
I want to echo what Ms. Munns just got through saying, but I also want to ask you a question. Is that project scheduled at the cleanwater.org site?
It is actually inside the facilities plan. We can post up there separately.
Why don't you just email it to me?
Okay, yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem Pagal.
Thank you, Your Honor. I would like to thank you also, Mr. Stowell, for this another milestone. Just waiting for the conditional approval and the final approval from the Department of Ecology to proceed with this project.
Councilmember Olmberg.
Thank you. Just ditto those comments from the other council members.
Councilmember Severance.
Thank you, Mayor. Same with me on the ditto, and especially to you who kind of picked this thing up in the middle. You've done a very nice job, I think, of not only picking it up, but carrying it to this point. So thanks. Joe.
Thank you.
Councilmember Eisen.
Well, I personally poured through every page of those binders.
Good
So
job.
let me tell you, no, I'm kidding. No, I echo the sentiments. I appreciate all the effort that you guys have put forward, and I'm really excited that this is moving forward. There's a light at the end of the tunnel, finally. It didn't seem like this day would ever come. I move to authorize staff to submit the draft wastewater facilities plan to the State of Washington Department of Ecology.
Second.
Got a motion from Councilmember Heisen, second by Councilmember Munns. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? That passes unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Stoll. We're going to leave our city engineer up there for our next agenda item. Mr. Stoll.
Welcome back.
Back again.
to the Joe Show. Got to have some fun with it. This is the next step, the next chapter in what we're planning to do here. This is what we're looking to do is the contract with Carollo to start on the next phase of design work, or the start of design work, the next phase of work together. We've decided to do this as an amendment to their existing contract and add on an additional scope of work and fees with that. It's pretty common to do things that way. These slides are just ditto from the other presentation. The project need and project goals are the same because this is just a continuation of where we were. What is the objectives? What are we hoping to gain from the preliminary design? What are our goals? Well, the first of those is to complete value engineering, and you'll have to give me a little bit of a break on this. I'm going to go into more detail in a minute on it, but I'm just going to kind of go over the big pieces right now. Finalize the location of the treatment plant within the Windjammer vicinity. Procure the major process equipment that we'll need for design. Complete that 30% design in preparation for figuring out how we're going to send this thing out and get it built. So what I want to remind you of is that we're not just getting Carollo when we select them as this consultant. We're also getting a whole team of sub-consultants that work with them. And this is the same or very similar team to what we had with the facilities plan. And it has everything from environmental to outfall design to odor control. There's a whole lot of specialties that go into the work that we're performing here. What I want to remind you of also is that it's not everything. There are some other things that are not included, and it's items that it would be in the city's best interest to retain control over. And one of those is the value engineering facilitator and team. What the value engineering does is that allows us at about 10 to 15% design. We bring in a consultant that specializes in reviewing and doing value engineering, finding ways to make it better. And they bring in an outside team that's not familiar with the project to help with that. It's in our best interest to hire that person ourselves as opposed to having Carollo do that. Property acquisition expert or right-of-way specialist to help us with acquiring that property, that finalized wastewater treatment plant location. Investigator, which basically means archaeologist. What that, we're, as you may know, we're looking to hire a staff archaeologist, and I'm looking for this to be one for them to help lead us on this to some degree. They may not be able to do all of it, but they will be able to get us moving forward on that. And then there's three, handful of different specialty type planners. There's parks and open space, transportation, and commercial real estate. And these may or may not be needed depending on what we decide to do, but it's important to have the professional opinion on how this treatment plant is going to fit into our community and what other improvements we might see from that and how it might be a catalyst to other things that might be a step further than the treatment plant itself. And then a charrette facilitator, we're going to have another one of those charrettes to as a work group to select that, finalize the location of the treatment plant. And depending on the delivery method, there's, if we decide to go with general contractor, construction manager, we have to have an advisor help us with that. That's part of state law. You have to go get approved to do that, and they require somebody with some experience to help you through that process. So the scope of services with Carollo is broken into 7 tasks. The first one is general project management that deals with providing a management plan, monitoring reports, and help management meetings above and beyond other meetings that we might have. The value engineering support, which I've talked about, and it includes their service includes following through with the recommendation to the city as to which of those value engineering comments that come back help us through which of those we would really apply to what we're trying to do. Task 300 is the public process support, and that gets us through everything that when you see Brian's face over here at a meeting, that's the task that goes under. As well as some other items, but that's the crux of it there. Task 4, this is the meat of the scope of work. This is actually getting us through 30% design and is roughly half the budget. And I should note on there too, it includes the major equipment procurement, and specifically for the membranes, because we've decided to go with an MBR facility. You need to get those early on so they can be incorporated into the design, because each vendor has very unique requirements. And if we have those early, have them on it early, they can help us with the design work as well. UV disinfection, there's a number of different types of UV disinfection. It's really kind of interesting. It's just a UV bulb, but there's different ways that it's set up, and that helps us with disinfection so we don't have to use as much chlorine. Brian will probably correct me on this, but aside from just regulations, we might not even, we'll have to use chlorine because we have to, but the UV disinfection does a great job. It was in combination with the membrane plant. Task 500 is project delivery analysis. This is a relatively small dollar amount in the big scheme of things, but they're going to go through and help us determine which is the best delivery method for us, whether it's design, bid, build, like we're all used to, design, build, or GCCM, like we talked about before. It's just nice to check in towards the end of 30% design and help us decide which one of those we want to go with. And task 600, now that we know that Windjammer vicinity is where the plant's going, let's go ahead and get started on replacing that outfall that's collapsed. So I've asked them to go ahead and do 100% design and permitting on the outfall. It just so happens the work that goes into this dovetails very nicely into the facilities plan. So the permitting and environmental that we learn from this process will get fed through back into the environmental review of the facilities plan. And I'm really looking forward to getting that done. That'll help relieve a lot of stresses on the system and give us some redundancy. Task 700 is management reserve, and that it's basically 5% of the contract amount to allow me to make some judgment calls as we move along to keep things rolling. Of course, when I would do anything like that, I'd bring it back to you and let you know what I'm up to. But 5% is a relatively small amount. It typically is around 10. But based on the contract amount, I thought it was appropriate to leave it where it was. This is the cost breakdown by task. So the dollar amount we're looking at total today is $2,081,168. And then I've also broken that into by activity, and this is kind of an important comparison here. Traditional delivery, traditional design, we wouldn't be doing the value engineering public process as much. The outfall design, that would all be different. So if you look at just the traditional, it's about $1.5 million. There's about $470,000 worth of additional services plus the management reserve that gets us to the $2 million. I thought it was just a nice twist on the way the numbers show up to kind of give you an idea where we're at. Project schedule. This is the fun graph again. So that's the facilities plan we saw the last presentation in green. The red shows a preliminary design extending into 2014. And final design is the blue, which extends from 2014 into 2015, with construction actually starting with early projects before that's completed. And then construction, and those dashed lines indicate that there's smaller projects starting, clearing the site, working on our cultural resources, things like that, with startup expected for the end of 2017. And what this has done, what they've done is they've taken the facilities plan and preliminary design and drugged those down into a closer view. Still the same colors. Green is the same thing, and red is the same thing as above. And I thought it was nice to highlight opportunities for the public to speak up. So we have these open houses that are spread throughout this phase of work. And mostly those precede council action, which are the diamonds on there. So it allows us to bring this to you like we have with everything else, like the last workshop we did. So we can get into more detail if we need to. In these working groups, what we're looking to do with those is select some members of the community to help us determine the look and feel of what this treatment plant's going to be. And this is the big one that everybody's been interested in, is the charrette, and this is where in September we'll be looking to finalize that site and get that honed in on where we're going to put the treatment plant. So how did I verify? What did I do to check to make sure everything was all right? Well, I did a lot of looking around. There's a lot of industry guidelines out there to help us determine if the cost was good. There's some similar projects. There's other treatment plants. There's other city projects. So how do I know that the cost that we're getting from Corolla to do this work and the scope of work is right? So this is my homework on it, is what it boils down to. So what I've found is the studies that typically just address the total design cost. I haven't got into it far enough to see very many, if any, that just talk about preliminary design to 30%. So here's my variables that I have, the math man in me speaking up. We got preliminary design, which is today, of $2 million. We have final design, so we'll be coming back in about a year for another contract to finish it, right? To get from 30% to the finish line. So, and then what's the total? And what I've learned from these studies is that total hovers around 10% of the total construction cost. So, yeah, I'm scratching my head because that's, how do we fit all this in? This is where I hope I can explain this well. Okay, so this is one of the studies, and I know it's California, forgive me, but it was a good study, so I couldn't pass it up. It has, it's a report that they put out yearly on capital improvement projects, and it's all the cities listed. I mean, San Francisco to San Diego, all the big cities in between. They all contribute a list of projects they've worked on and what they spent on them, so that you can use it as a tool for budgeting. In this table, it's yes, it's a little bit hard to read, but this is an excerpt from it. What it shows is on the top where it says design cost, this column here. The design cost, if you take the total construction cost that you expect and multiply it by that percent, it gives you an estimate of what you could expect that total design fee to be. And on here they have municipal projects, street projects, piping projects, parks. Not all those apply to what we're trying to do today. So I selected a few that kind of made sense. There's just major municipal projects is about 12% of the total construction cost. Other municipal projects, it's around 14%. Down at pipe projects, I saw they had pump stations, and that was reasonably close. So 10% of the construction cost would be what you could expect in design fees. I also compared it to similar projects in the area, and this is along the bottom here we have the size of the treatment plant, so it's in millions of gallons per day. And along the left side, it's that same percentage that I was talking about before. It's the percent of total construction cost. And you can see all the different treatment plants in the region, Blaine being the one we're mostly familiar with, but there's Bellingham and Everett. And when you kind of average them out, it's a little over 10%. 10 was an easy number to stick with at this point in the game, just as a way to check where we're at. So here's a summary of all that. We have preliminary design, which we've talked about. The total cost. So when we brought this to you before, we've been talking $93.5 million. We've been talking all these numbers, right? When it gets down, when you strip off all the overhead stuff that goes on and you get down to the phases that we're proposing, with Navy participation, we're looking at about $60 million. I wish it was 60,000. $60 million for the treatment plant. Without Navy participation, it'd be about 67. So if you take 10% of that, you're looking at a total design cost of about $6 to $6.7 million. And that's just rule of thumb looking at past projects. So what we could expect is when we come back in about a year to finish out design, we're looking at about another $4 to $4.7 million. This is just a rule of thumb. What I'm really trying to do with this is prepare you that this is not the last time I'm going to be coming back, and there's a lot more to come. An important part of this is to remember that it's included in the $93.5 million. All this budget that we've been talking about, these design fees are dovetailed in there. It's not, I'm not asking for something above and beyond what we've already planned for. And this is the summary down below of the data from the previous slide. So funding, this is, it's coming out of the water fund, and it's when I put water fund on there, it's coming out of the sewer fund. That would be awful clever of me, but that's not the way it works. It's included in the current rate structure that we proposed or provided. I think it was originally developed in 2010. We've been sticking true to the rate increases, and it was revisited just recently by Katie Isaacson and Sean Korn with HDR yet again. It's one of those things we'll be reviewing from time to time, but it's been planned for, is what it boils down to. So that's the end of my presentation. When it comes time to make an action, I ask that you look at the screen. I noticed the one in the agenda bill. This one's a little bit better, I think.
Thank you, Mr. Stowell. At this time, we'll turn to the public and see if there's any public comment. If you have any public comment, we're going to have you up at the microphone and ask you to state your name, and you have 3 minutes. Okay. Seeing none, we'll go ahead and close public comment. We'll bring back our city engineer. I notice that we've got Mr. Brian Matson with Crowell Engineers here as well if the city council has questions. And turning to the city council, starting with Councilmember Heisen.
Thank you for making the requested action part of your presentation. That's helpful. I don't have any questions. That was really thorough. I really appreciate your presentations and the graphs and how you try to anticipate what we're going to ask. It's every one of your presentations is
Thank you. I
great.
try.
You're doing a great job. I appreciate it.
Councilmember Severance.
Thank you, Mayor. Couple of things. I do believe it's a really good decision to complete the entire design for our outfall. That's your task 600. Get that done as quickly as we can. Makes really good sense. When I looked at this number in the packet, I did a little my own math, and then I raced down to talk to Mr. Merriman and asked him how much money was in that wastewater account. And he verified just kind of what you said. He said there's about $8.5 million in there, actually. He said there's plenty of money to do this. So then my next question was, where are we going to be a year from now, in April, after we've spent this $2 million? And he said with the already increased rates now and the additional revenue that will come in, he anticipates will be close to that same amount of money in the account at that point. So that's a good thing to know. It feels like it's well managed so far. So nice job. Thanks. That's all I have.
Councilmember Severance. Councilmember Umber.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Stowell, could you go to your schedule again, please, and show me the date, your drop-dead date for the property acquisition on that schedule, please?
This one here, we're looking to have the site selected and acquired in September.
September, okay. Then I want to go, while you have that charrette up there, didn't Carollo facilitate that, our last charrette?
We actually had an independent person come in. Brian was there, but it was an independent person that came in and helped facilitate that.
Okay, thank you. You know, Mr. Severan's information answered most of my questions.
That's great.
So I'm excited for you to move forward, for the city to move forward on this, and thank you for all the work that you've done.
Mayor Pro Tem Pagal.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Stowell, on the same line on the property acquisition, I think I'll use the same words here in the task and subtask, the word assumptions. On the property acquisition, when the final location of the treatment facility is made, you make assumption that the property owners there will sell the property?
You know, that's a great question, and I think that's going to we're going to lead to some policy questions that we bring to council and ask some highlights of what the parameters we have for siting the treatment plant in the Windjammer vicinity. How aggressive might we be with well, and that's why the commercial real estate planner was important too, is we want to look at this thing holistically. We have open space, we have active businesses, we have some vacant property, I shouldn't say vacant, but unused property, parking lot area that's unused. We have all kinds of things to look at, and we'll be coming back to get some parameters from council, specifically with not, you know, either, I guess let me take a step back, I'm sorry. I don't think anybody's eager to take anybody's property from them without them being willing, to be blunt. I don't think anybody's in that position. What my goal is to get everybody in a room together and have a discussion about where the best place is for the treatment plant. And with that, I hope to have that wash out the right place for the treatment plant with a willing seller.
Have you come up in your discussion about eminent domain, or is that out of the question? I know that's ultimately a policy that the council has to set.
That's a policy that the council would have to dictate, but you know, I honestly, opinion is that's not a road I care for. I don't think that's the kind of community that we are, but you know, we have to look at what's best for the city as well. So hopefully we won't get to that point.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Campbell.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Stowell's presentation, the questions that have been answered so far, or asked so far, have answered all of my questions, that and along with what we heard at the Elks Club the last time we were down there. All the presentations I've heard have been very, very good, and I thank you for that. But as a side note, this particular city council will never, ever vote yes on a property taking from the citizens. Thank you.
Councilmember Munns.
Mr. Stowell, my question concerns the outfall. I believe we have a public work trust loan to redo the outfall, or did we lose that?
That is a separate project.
Okay.
That's for the 42-inch stormwater
Okay,
outfall that's on
okay.
the other side of the park.
All right.
And no, that's, we have that secured through 2016.
And we're
We're working
moving on that?
We are moving on that.
Okay.
That's, we actually hired somebody to go out and take a look at the alignment again, so we're back on that one again.
Okay, just
That-
didn't
that's
want to
another one
lose
that-
that good money that we worked so hard
I got to
to
give
get, so-
credit to Arnie Peterschmidt for helping me with all these. He's the one that's lead on that one.
Well, then pass on my thanks too. No other questions. Thank you.
Councilmember Svedes.
I too appreciate your PowerPoints and graphs. You take a lot of information, you distill it down. I appreciate that you hit the important dates for us. And there's a lot of checks and balances in place. I was pleased to learn, it was at the Elks, the last meeting we had, about the value engineering and what that adds to the process as far as checks and balances. I would just continue to encourage the public. At that open house, we had a fairly light turnout. So at those open houses in Charettes, please speak up and turn out, because this will be your wastewater treatment plant. That's all. I'd make a motion if, I move to authorize the mayor to sign consultant agreement amendment number 6 with Carollo Engineers in the amount of $2,081,168 for preliminary design related to a new wastewater treatment plant.
Second.
Got a motion from Councilmember Svedes, second by Councilmember Munns. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? And that passes unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Stowell. Thank you, Mr. Mattson. As we look at our agenda, the next agenda item is actually an agenda bill coming from myself. This agenda bill is a motion to confirm appointment and approval of employment contract with city attorney. Purpose of this agenda bill presents for council confirmation of my appointment of Mr. Bert D. Boughton to serve as the city attorney. And to give the council history, since June of 2012, the city has contracted with the firm of Weed, Grafston, Benson for interim city attorney services. During this period, the city advertised twice for city attorney, each time attracting a small number of applicants. In response to these two unsuccessful recruitment efforts, the city council authorized hiring a professional headhunting firm, Prothman Company. While the number of applicants did not grow significantly following an extensive outreach and recruitment effort, 2 candidates were identified for interviews. Both candidates appeared on February 22nd, 2013 before a review panel consisting of myself, council members Heisen, Mayor Pro Tem Pagao, City Administrator Court, Finance Director Mr. Doug Merriman, and Human Resources Manager Ms. Cheryl Lawler. Following the interviews, the panel provided feedback on the pluses and minuses of each candidate. From this feedback and my own assessment of the candidates, I identified Bert D. Boughton as my top choice to fill the city attorney position. Mr. Boughton was invited back to Oak Harbor to meet informally with the remaining 5 council members, several more department heads, and the entire legal department staff. This was not a second interview, but instead was intended to offer an opportunity for key people to meet with and converse with Mr. Boughton prior to bringing his name forward for confirmation. Both Dr. Court and Lynn Stokesbury of Prothman Company attended all those sessions. I am pleased, excited to be bringing forward Bert D. Boughton as my appointment to the position of city attorney, and ask that the city council confirm my appointment. I believe that Mr. Boughton is the right choice for Oak Harbor and have no doubt that he will provide outstanding service to our community. In fact, Mr. Boughton is here this evening. In fact, Mr. Boughton, if you would like, I'm going to have you at the podium, and if you wanted to say a couple words, that would be great. Mr. Boughton.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, members of the City Council. It's, I would say, a great honor and a pleasure for me to be here tonight. I want to thank the mayor for the offer that's been made to me. I want to thank you as City Council members for your time and your consideration tonight. I think I met all the members of the City Council during this process. You folks probably got to ask a few questions of me, which you wanted to ask. I'm guessing they're just by nature of the process would have probably liked a little more time. I know there were questions that I wanted to ask that I didn't get an opportunity to ask at the time, just simply because it seemed like time was always short. So really what I want to do tonight is I want to give you a little bit more information. And I kind of, when I looked at the agenda bill, or I'm sorry, at the agenda, and saw that this item was on last and thought, wow, I wonder if the City Council will get to this before 8 o'clock. And then my next thought was, I wonder who thought to put the attorney on last and let him talk. But the City Council has been moving along at a rapid pace tonight, so we should be out of here before bedtime. What I really want to do is I want to give you a little bit more information. I really want to hit 3 major points. I want to reiterate to the City Council why I'm really excited by the opportunity of being the city attorney here at Oak Harbor, by the prospect of moving my family here and making this community our home. Second, I want to tell you why I think I would be a good addition to the Oak Harbor City staff as the city attorney here, why I would be a integral member of the management team that you folks are lucky enough to have here at the City of Oak Harbor. And finally, I want to tell you what you, as city leaders, can expect of me if you confirm me as the city attorney, and what I would expect of myself in that role. So first, I know that at least some of the City Council members heard some of my reasoning and why I was excited about Oak Harbor. And I think the City Council members that were in the very first interview, I don't know that came out. So if you've heard this before, I apologize. I'm going to reiterate a little bit. But I think many of you know I was born and raised in rural eastern Montana. That rural, small town upbringing, honestly, even at my age, still to this day has a huge impact on me. It pretty much informs everything that I do. My value system largely comes out of the fact that I grew up in a small town with a small town sense of identity and the values that go along with it. And the prospect of being able to give my kids, frankly, the opportunity to experience at least some of that is a huge motivating factor for me. Excuse me. What I alluded to is maybe one of the most attractive things about Whidbey Island and North Whidbey Island, Oak Harbor in particular, is you folks really have everything. It's almost idyllic from my perspective. I'm sure there are people that would disagree with me, but you have a small town sense, like small town America, a strong sense of self, a strong sense of identity. You have proximity to the salt water, you have open spaces, rural working agriculture, you have proximity to Bellingham, Mount Baker, the North Cascades. So the opportunities in terms of outdoors, really almost endless. And I bet you didn't realize I was here stumping for the position of your new director of tourism, but really honestly, to say that is attractive to me and to a young family is a gross understatement. Those are really one of the main reasons why really looking forward to relocating here and making this our home. So my second point, in addition to why I think that Oak Harbor in a lot of ways would be ideal for myself and my family, I think that I would make a good, strong addition to the city's leadership team. And so I think not only would Oak Harbor fit me well, I think I would fit in this team well. And that's based on my past experience. We talked in interviews somewhat, and I'm not going to belabor all of my legal experience. I've been practicing since 1992, 1993. I spent a major part of my career actively involved in both civil and criminal litigation, involved negotiations as part of both. I've handled cases that run the gamut from homicide to property disputes over easements, from rental disputes to custodial kidnapping. Pretty much in every position that I've held, I've managed large caseloads. I've managed large felony criminal caseloads. I've managed large civil motions caseloads. I've represented clients, individual clients in dissolutions, divorces, with complex property issues, child custody issues, represented contractors in regard to contracting issues. Even at one point in time represented a former planning director in seeking an anti-harassment order that came out of a very contentious land use action in Kitsap County. And I certainly hope that those types of things aren't going on here, but I've run my own business, which frankly in a lot of ways was life-changing, prompted me to become a manager, to learn how to manage people, to learn how to manage projects, and really to educate myself in that regard, and spurred me in that direction. Certainly created in me the desire to run an office and to build a style. And as most of you know, most recently I was employed as the Assistant City Attorney at the City of Port Townsend. While there, I built their prosecutor's office, I did their criminal prosecution, and in addition to that, was involved in pretty much all of the civil aspects that I had time for and actually fit with my other responsibilities. I was involved in code enforcement, advised the command staff of the police department on union labor issues, as well as pretty extensively on the Fair Labor Standards Act, advised primarily the police department on risk management issues, and helped them review portions of their policies and procedures in regard to, or in the context of risk management. I advised the planning director and his staff on complex code enforcement issues, performed employee investigations, and interacted with union representatives, negotiated contracts with providers of electronic home monitoring services, and also was on the negotiation team that contracted with the Jefferson County District Court for provision of the municipal court services for the City of Port Townsend. And I was also responsible for about a half of the total number of public records requests that came into the city at any given time. So I believe that the variety and the amount of experience that I have in a number of different areas of law has really prepared me, honestly, for this moment. And that is the reason I feel that I'd be a good, strong addition to the leadership team here. The last thing that I want to address, which I indicated to you, is really what we didn't get an opportunity too much to talk about in the interview process, is what, if you, the city council, confirm me as the city attorney, what you can, as city leaders, can expect from me. And I will indicate to you that this is what I would expect from myself. And the first is excellence. You can expect excellence in performance. I will expect from myself, as well as the people that work for me, a level of excellence in the work product that we produce. To that end, you can expect a commitment to professional development. Certainly one of the first things that I would do is evaluate the city attorney's office in terms of what strengths, weaknesses, and where the city attorney's office can improve. And I can tell you, as the city council, I've already begun that process with myself. That process certainly would be with an eye toward what is required for the job, what is required specifically for what's going on in Oak Harbor, and would have a strong commitment towards continuing professional development. Personally, I am currently signed up for a seminar on land use issues in Seattle on Thursday. Since I last spoke with the city council, have had a couple of meetings with friends and acquaintances of mine that are city attorneys in other cities, brainstorming and asking advice and becoming involved, much more involved in WSAMA, the Washington State Association of Municipal Attorneys, where I'm currently on the Civil Topics Committee. It would be my intent, certainly, to continue that level of involvement, certainly with WSAMA, and I can honestly say I'm thankful for the fact that I have a couple of very good resources in terms of professional contacts through that organization. The next thing that you can expect from me is integrity and the absolute highest level of ethical standards. Throughout the years, I guess I've been practicing now, 20 years. One of the first things, and honestly, I was fortunate enough to have a boss, my first real legal job, who really took his ethics serious. And one of the first lessons he taught me was you only have one reputation. If you tarnish it, it's almost impossible to regain it. And second thing he taught me was whenever you have an ethical issue, you don't ever even get close. Don't ever get close to the line. If you think you have a conflict of interest, for instance, if you think that there's an ethical issue, you steer widely clear. And honestly, I took that to heart. And so I've worked hard over the 20 years to establish and maintain a good reputation with my peers, with other attorneys, with the bench, with every judge that I've been in front of, and especially with the clerks, because they're the ones that really get the job done. So what I want you to know is that I'm absolutely committed in terms of my integrity, my honesty, and I would commit to you the highest level of professional ethics. And while I'm there, I just want to touch very briefly on something that was discussed actually numerous times throughout this process. I was asked the question, who do you work for? which I answered to the best of my ability and as honestly as I could. But one of the things that I wanted to touch on very briefly here tonight is a question which is very similar actually, but wasn't asked of me. And the difference I think is important. The question is, who as the city attorney do you represent versus who do you work for? And the reason that I bring that up is because I want you to know we're talking about ethics here, I'm talking about ethics, is there's an ethical rule which addresses that issue directly, the rules of professional conduct adopted by the Washington State Supreme Court, which are mandatory for all attorneys in the state of Washington. Rule of Professional Conduct 1.13 deals specifically with the representation of organizational clients. That includes municipalities, it includes basically any entity within government, could include nonprofit organizations or corporations, any type of an entity. And it's really clear. What it indicates is that an attorney who represents an organizational client represents the organization as a whole. Doesn't represent just one person, doesn't represent a group of people, except for in their professional capacity, the attorney represents the entire organization. And so what I wanted to hopefully clarify to some degree is that it would certainly be my intent to follow that ethical rule to the letter, along with all of the other rules of ethics. So that being said, you as city leadership can expect from me to give you my unbiased, objective, honest advice with the best interest of the city of Oak Harbor and its citizens in mind. Anytime you approached me, asked my opinion, that would be where I would come from. So my last point, promise, is the last thing you can, well, not the last thing, but another thing certainly that you can expect from me is just good old-fashioned hard work. If you confirm me as the city attorney, you can expect me to work hard. I'll work hard for you. I'll work hard for the citizens of Oak Harbor. I'll work hard to get on top of the existing caseload. I've already had some communications with the interim city attorney, Grant Weed, regarding that caseload and setting a schedule, at least tentatively, depending on what happens here tonight, to talk in specifics about how that transition will occur and to make sure that it happens as efficiently and smoothly as it absolutely can. And I want you to be comfortable with the fact also that I will work hard to develop or take the city attorney's office from where it is, and by all accounts, everybody that I've talked to, Grant Weed and other individuals, the city attorney's office in the city of Oak Harbor has some great people in it. And so it would be my intent to hopefully take that up a notch, take it to the next level, and provide the leadership here in the city and ultimately the citizens of Oak Harbor with the highest level of legal service that I possibly can. So with that, I will wrap up. I want to thank you all again, and I'm looking forward to rolling up my sleeves and getting to work. Thank you.
Mr. Broughton. Well, you might want to stick around. The council may have a question or two for you, but I think we can see why we've brought Mr. Boughton's name forward for the position of city attorney. My recommended action for the city council is to confirm my appointment of Mr. Bert D. Boughton to the position of city attorney, as well as authorize myself to sign the employment agreement with Bert Boughton as city attorney. But before we turn to the council, we'll turn to the public and see if there's any public comment. Anyone wishing to comment regarding this agenda item can do so now. If you state your name and speak into the microphone, you have 3 minutes.
Mayor, City Council, as you heard Mr. Boughton speak, he is from the city of Port Townsend, originally worked as the assistant city attorney there. Prior to that, I believe he's from Kitsap County. I was aware of the fact that he applied here. I purposely recused myself from this entire process and stayed out of it. I did not know where he was. I was informed when there were 2 and we were down to the last, that he was in the running and being considered. I can speak personally from having worked with him and being the second in command in Port Townsend. I was on the hiring committee when we selected a prosecuting city attorney. I had written the proposal to do that. We had contracted with prosecuting attorneys prior to that. The system wasn't working. We were failing miserably to the point where I had a judge breathing down my neck and making my life quite miserable. So we went through the whole process. He was selected. Out of that process, I can tell you he was handed an office that was empty and open with a desk and nobody else to work with him. And if any of you have had any legal experience, you know that that's a nightmare for an attorney. And he was handed the cases and said, here you go for it. No legal clerk, no nothing to work with. And the prosecuting city attorney we contracted with wasn't being very cooperative in regard to working with him. I watched Mr. Boughton, who was someone I didn't know prior to the interview process, take that office with just a police clerk that I handed him and create a very ethical, very working, extremely well-managed office that not only worked with all of our criminal cases, but with the department and with the city in handling different things and doing an outstanding job to the point where I had judges commending me for the selection we had made. I had a county prosecutor over there who, if he had the budget, had said that he would hire him away from me and take him and use him for him. So my recommendation tonight is that you consider hiring Mr. Boughton for this position. I think what you'll find is what he lacks in experience, he will more than make up in drive and willingness to learn. So this is an outstanding individual and an opportunity I don't think you should let go. So, thank you.
Thank you, Chief Green. Anyone else for public comment on this agenda bill? Okay, seeing none, we'll go ahead and close public comment. Turn to the City Council, starting with Councilmember Sevadius. If you have any questions, comments.
Thank you, Mayor. The first time I had a chance to meet Mr. Boughton was at the call it a meet and greet, and I appreciate you taking the time to do that. We discussed different topics: land negotiations, land acquisition, contract law, labor negotiations, and specifically also negotiating with tribal nations. When you consider the scope of the projects that we're looking at over the next couple of years, 2, 3, 4 years, to me those are very important areas to be up to speed on, or we want to attract the best attorney that we can. And for me personally, I was left wanting a little bit more as far as the applicants with regard to those issues. I'd be curious to hear, I guess, as we go around, what Ms. Heisen and Mr. Pagao might have to say, since they sat on that board. But for me personally, right now, I don't know if I can support the confirmation once again, just because of the lack I think there might be in some of those areas.
Well, since it's my agenda bill, I guess the concern or hesitation, if something were to come across.
Excuse me, point of order. This is the council portion of the discussion.
Correct, on an agenda bill that I've introduced.
Yeah, but we have not asked for the mayor's comments. Am I out of order on this thing? Help me out here. It seems odd that it's the council's time to talk about this.
Right.
And then we're getting an interruption when we're going through the discussion with the council member. He has the floor. The mayor doesn't have the floor. The mayor is the facilitator at this particular stage of this.
And
that's
right.
the way I understand this.
And what I heard from one of your fellow council members was a question or concern in reference to the lack of experience of Mr. Boughton. And so if it would please the council member, if I were in your shoes, I guess the question that I would ask, if council would allow me to, is if something were to come across Mr. Boughton's desk where he's not well versed in how he would handle that. I didn't know if you wanted to, pose that question to him. I'm sure he'd be willing to, tackle that if you wanted to.
So I'll wait at this point to hear what my other peers have to say. Thanks.
Councilmember Munns.
Mr. Bowden, I enjoyed very much our informal conversation. I have no doubt that you have the integrity for this position and the drive to learn what you don't. But in going over your resume, I wasn't privileged to be on the committee, and looking at what we published for an ideal candidate, there wasn't many things I could check off that you actually had the experience for. And I'm just concerned that we would be having a very good assistant prosecuting attorney, no doubt, but we need someone that knows the practice of municipal law, public administration, drafting ordinance of resolution, the knowledge of land use. I went through the list, and it said a must is knowledge of land use and environmental laws, a must, experience in timely, and I'm hiring someone that I don't doubt you're not qualified and smart enough to learn, but we would be paying you 6 months to a year to get up to speed, and we really need someone to hit the ground running. And I just have doubts with this appointment. I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor, when I see what we advertise for, looking at his resume, and it doesn't fit. It isn't that he couldn't be able to do this eventually, but right now in analysis, we need someone to hit the ground running that has this knowledge. And I'm just a little concerned spending top dollar for someone that doesn't fit what we advertise for in looking for someone. So I just have reservations at this time.
Councilmember Campbell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I had the pleasure of meeting in the conference room with you one afternoon, and I agree with what my two colleagues have said here about a little bit of a lack of experience for that spot over there. But after the meeting, I was talking to someone and they asked my opinion, and I told them that. But I also told them that I was extremely impressed by the way you came off as being willing to do all the hard work that was going to be necessary for you to get up to speed. I'm not like my two colleagues. I don't have a doubt. I think you'd be good at this spot. A short story, I was in a position of management one time in an organization, and I needed to hire someone, and this guy came in, and he did not have experience on what I needed him to do, but he had an awful lot of experience somewhere else. I hired him and everything worked well. The man was working on nuclear weapons. You don't make mistakes there. He did an excellent job. Now, I'm not going to ask you to do nuclear weapons, but I believe that you've got the backbone to do what's necessary and take the late hours in the evening once in a while to learn what you need to do, and I'll support you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Campbell. Mayor Pro Tem Pagal.
Thank you, Your Honor. I was one of the members of the panel who interviewed the two top candidates for the position of city attorney. Before that, the city hired a recruiting firm to look for qualified applicants. And this recruiting firm, which is the Prothman Company, headed by Mr. Lynn Stokesbury, and he was there during the interview, presented the two candidates at the same time. So those two candidates were already pre-qualified by the recruiting firm. So they're qualified for the position of the city attorney. And as I understood it, our mission was to forward two names to the mayor, and the mayor will make the final selection. In this case, we didn't have a hard time to forward two names because there were only two candidates. I think in my feeling that in the interview, we have to look for other traits because we already have read the backgrounds, the experiences of those two candidates. For me, I was looking for other trait like potential. Potential meaning capable of. Capable being, will this candidate fit in this position? Or the other trait, my impression of the candidate. Will the candidate be quite impressive and will be capable of running the legal office or working as a member of the team, responding to the legal needs of the department heads and city council. So I wasn't looking at the experience because I already read all the experiences and background at the time of the interview. We interviewed the two candidates on the prepared questions about legal aspects and legal issues concerning a city. And I think that the responses that I have received were quite impressive on those two candidates. So in this regard, I fully support the recommendation of the mayor for the appointment of Mr. Bert D. Boughton. Thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Councilmember Olmberg.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, first of all, thank you for applying, Mr. Boutman. It's been a difficult challenge, quite frankly, for the city to get applicants to respond for the position of a city attorney. In the course of doing this, of course, I met with you with a couple of the other council members to review your credentials. I also took the opportunity to speak with several of our department heads and some of the employees who you could potentially be working with. And there was a common pattern that developed out of this, these interviews, and particularly with Mr. Stokesbury at Rothman. And I will just share with you some of the notes that came up when we had that interview, and also some of the comments. These are consistent with the other department heads and some of the employees. He appears to be very honest. He has a strong background primarily in prosecution, as you were the assistant prosecutor for Jefferson County, I believe. And you have a good relationship with the police department, and particularly with the police chief, Mr. Green. Apparently you work together. And Mr. Stokesbury at Prothman specifically said he has potential. But he also said in the course of this, the drawbacks are that the applicant's credentials do not meet the requirements that we advertise for, and you emphasized that when I asked you that question too, that you had a very strong background in prosecution. We have a prosecutor here, by the way, and so this is a bit of a duplication on strengths. That you did not meet the criteria or the credentials that we were advertising for, particularly in land use and in labor negotiations and with working with the tribes. And I believe I specifically asked you, in these areas of little or no experience, how would you compensate for that? And your response was, correct me if I am misstating this, that you have other sources to go to, but you would also be relying heavily on Mr. Weed. I think that's a correct statement. Can you respond to that?
Yeah, I certainly can respond. I certainly don't recall stating what you just indicated about relying on Mr. Weed. And I think Councilmember Olmberg, you'd also indicated that your belief was that I had told you that I had no experience in dealing with tribes. Is that correct?
Limited experience or no experience. That's correct, yeah.
Well, I have had experience dealing with the Suquamish tribe in Kitsap.
Okay.
I actually interacted with individuals from the tribe on a fairly regular basis in their child support collection agency. Actually put on trainings for their members on the Suquamish reservation. So I don't know that it's accurate to say that I've had little or no. Actually, I've had quite a bit of contact with that particular tribe. I may have said I don't have experience with the tribe here in North Whidbey and specifically in the Oak Harbor area, but I certainly have had other dealings with the Suquamish tribe. In response to the question as it relates to Mr. Weed, I certainly don't recall stating that. I can tell the council this, that certainly if I were confronted by a substantive area of law where I have limited experience, I'm absolutely going to ask for advice. One of the reasons that I shared with you the fact that it would be my intent, and in fact my commitment, to be actively involved in the Washington State Association of Municipal Attorneys. I have a couple of friends. I have a prior boss who is committed to me to be a resource, another close, well, I shouldn't say close friend, but actually professional acquaintance who also has committed the same thing, who's city attorney south of Tacoma. And so in that terms, I feel like I certainly have access to a wealth of knowledge. And I would also say this, if I have a brief minute, is that my experience at the city of Port Townsend, even though I got to handle many of the civil areas that a city attorney handles, which I outlined very quickly here, and unfortunately, because it didn't line up with my caseload, I didn't get involved with land use in particular, and wasn't able to get involved with public works contracting. I do have experience, with reviewing contracts in the contracting area, specifically in relation to indemnification clauses and the other issues that go with that. But that's in a private setting, with myself as a contractor, and also with other contractors that I reviewed contracts for. But I will say that probably the most valuable experience, honestly, whether I had the opportunity to get involved in one or two land use actions at the city of Port Townsend or not, in my experience, frankly, the land use actions from jurisdiction to jurisdiction typically differ quite greatly. In other words, the issues here in Oak Harbor, I can almost guarantee you, are different than the issues in Port Townsend.
Okay, can I go back to my questions here? I think we're drifting off, if you don't mind,
I
please.
apologize.
Yeah. I want to go back to this, just to comment on the Mr. Weed thing. In all due respect to Mr. Weed, he's a very competent attorney, and I wouldn't fault you for going to him if you needed the help, obviously. But the reason that resonated in my mind when the comment was made is I started doing some number things on this thing, and the salary range that was advertised for this job was at $95,000 to $117,000, and then we're going to another attorney at roughly $200 an hour for additional education. That's what resonated in my mind when we had that conversation, and so I'm not really that interested in having an employee at $100,000+ a year to have backup from somebody who may be an additional $50,000 a year, and it's urgent. I know this is urgent. I have been pushing this thing about getting an agenda, or getting a permanent city attorney. It's expensive what we're doing right now, but I don't see how it's going to really get any cheaper, at least for the next 6 months or so in the future. Now, the council will be criticized if we do not confirm you tonight, and I have no idea what the council will do. But, you know, we didn't create this situation, and as Mr. Stokesbury said to us when we were meeting with him, we're having a difficult time getting applicants, qualified applicants, to respond even to the ad. We've basically worn out the market in this area because of our reputation and the way previous employees have been treated. So I would like to hear what the other council members have to say, but I am probably a no on this one.
Councilmember Severns.
Thank you, Mayor. I was in that same interview meeting, Mr. Boughton, when we did speak about Mr. Weed's firm, and I believe there was an inference that you could. I don't know that you indicated that you would do that a lot, but you could felt a comfort zone going back there. But let me go back to a comment that you made when you first took the podium tonight. You talked about some of the same things. I got to be in the third interview group, so you had cleared some earlier questions. I was told about Sturgis and a few things that you didn't have a lot of familiarity with. My first question to you was the learning curve, and I understand, and you did too at that time, that there's going to be a learning curve. There will be a time period where you will be catching up on some of the details of this job that you don't have experience in. But when you first took the podium tonight, you apologized in that it kind of has gone fast. We really haven't gotten to meet each other a lot. We haven't talked much with each other. And I'm going to speak to the mayor about this, because I think we'll get to talk about this at further length. In our last selection process, we actually had a meet and greet with all candidates. Yes, we had a selection team, and there were some questions, but nevertheless, we got through that. I don't know that the experience level, and that's still my concern. The learning curve is still my concern. I don't think this is a position where you can hit the ground and then have to wait to start or have when. I can tell you that Mr. Weed has taken some questions from this dais that have been difficult questions for him, and I believe there are going to be more for you. So I think it's going to be an situation if we get there. But, backing up a little, I'm going to ask the mayor when this is over about, this is uncomfortable for me to do this way, but was there another candidate? I'd like to find out some things about the other candidate. I'm not sure this is a forum to do it. Unfortunately, here we are. Sorry to you for that. As Mr. Almberg said, small city, word travels, people talk. Some is fair, some is not. Things are said. Some may be true, some may be not. But pretty much everybody agreed. You'd make a pretty good neighbor, and you're a likable guy. And I don't want you to have any offense for any of this that's being said tonight, because I don't think the process, I think process could have been better, could have worked better for you than having been up here to have to hear it this way. But the learning curve is a concern to me. Tribal military, those kind of things that we deal with often, and that are very, very important issues to us, are something we need experience in. Criminal, you've got. Unfortunately, we've got that. Civil, that's the learning curve, and the kind of questions that you're going to get asked about motions, Dias, Sturgis, it's concerning to me. So that's probably enough said. I wish I would have been on the selection committee. I'll bet I've hired more people than most people are on this dais in my career, but maybe next time. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Eisen.
Thank you, Mayor. Having been on the selection committee and having had a chance to meet both candidates and really speak at length with Mr. Boughton, I can address some of the things that have been said. To start with Mr. Servadius's question, during the interview, when we asked if something had come across Mr. Boughton's desk that he wasn't experienced in, his response at the time was that he would ask Grant Weed or one of his other resources, or he would go to the MRSC website. That was his response that I wrote down at the time. And I don't think the question is whether or not you're qualified, as Mr. Pagao said, having made it through the process. The question for me is whether or not you were the most qualified applicant that we met. We had 2 applicants, one with experience as a city attorney for numerous cities. He'd drafted legislation, worked with the tribes, worked with the military, done labor negotiations, handled all that stuff, and one without. And every single person in the room lobbied the mayor on behalf of the more experienced candidate, every single one of us. So you can imagine my surprise when the mayor chose the other candidate. From my financial standpoint, I'm concerned because the appointment of Mr. Boughton would necessitate the expense of hiring someone to do labor negotiations, which doesn't make any sense when we had someone who could have done that for us, and possibly retaining the services of Grant Weed, which also financially doesn't make any sense to me. From a practical standpoint, I agree, we do need someone who can hit the ground running. We need an experienced attorney who can answer questions immediately and with confidence. And in our current litigious atmosphere, I don't think we have the luxury of dealing with a learning curve. I think that you do have the potential to be an amazing city attorney. I just don't know if we have the luxury of the time that it would take to get you caught up, quite honestly. I like you very much. I think you're a very nice guy, and I really admire your enthusiasm and your work ethic. I really do. But having the benefit of the comparison and knowing that we had an experienced candidate versus one with much less experience, I'm befuddled, frankly. Again, this isn't pleasant, but when we need someone with experience and we have someone with experience, to me, it's irresponsible to confirm the appointment of the one with less experience, frankly. So I'm sorry, I can't support your confirmation tonight. I apologize.
So, turning to the council, what we heard from Councilmember Heisen is we don't have the time to get Mr. Boughton up to speed. We heard from Councilmember Munns that it's going to take at least 6 months to get up to speed. I guess the question I would have for council, if we're choosing not to confirm Mr. Boughton this evening, how much time, based upon our track history of recruiting and trying to find applicants, based on when we started, it's going to take well over 6 months, based upon what we know, possibly to get a candidate who wishes to apply again, knowing what they have to go through based upon what an applicant is going through this evening, to possibly apply for us to bring forward a name for possible confirmation. It's not gonna happen overnight. So,
Mr. Mayor, I would
Councilmember-
contend that that's a non-issue. We had another candidate who wanted to work here, who is extremely qualified, who could hit the ground running immediately.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion, and my motion would be not to confirm the mayor's appointment of Mr. Bert D. Boughton in the position of city attorney.
Second.
You have a motion to take no action. I don't even think you have to have a motion.
The motion was not to confirm.
Okay. We got a motion, and we've got a second from Councilmember Servadius. Any further discussion in reference to that motion? All those in favor, Councilmember Campbell.
I want, I have heard several, I know I can't change anyone's mind, and that's not what I'm attempting to do. but I have what I think is a legitimate question. I've heard several of you talk about we don't have the time, we're wasting a lot of money and all that stuff. How are we going to have an attorney in that office back there without spending money to get them? What are we going to do for the next, how long did it take us to do this one? 6 months? We're going to have to hire a consultant for another 6 months?
No.
Who's going to be the attorney if we don't hire a consultant, if we don't hire this man?
The other guy.
But I beg to differ with you. The mayor is the guy that hires. The council confirms. We cannot dictate who the mayor hires. By state law, it's his responsibility, and it falls within his bailiwick.
I'm not trying to dictate. I'm providing an
You-
option.
Point of order.
You are trying to
direct
dictate
your
because
question
you've
to the
already said the other guy.
As an option.
Point of order.
Mayor Pro Tem Pagal.
I would like to have council members direct comments, questions to the chair.
Thank you.
Councilmember Campbell.
Where are we going to get the money to do this for another 6 months?
Anything else? Mayor Pro Tem Pagal.
I have a question on the contract itself. Is there a clause for a probationary period, or is it somewhere else on the employee's handbook?
Point of order, Mayor. I think we have a motion on the floor.
If you want to speak to the motion is currently not to confirm. Mr. Boughton? Any further discussion?
Call for the vote.
Okay, call for the question. All those in favor of the motion not to confirm Mr. Boughton as our city attorney signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
Aye.
And that motion passes. Sorry, Mr. Boughton. Our, in your packets, we have future city council pending items. And at this time, we'll turn to our city administrator, Dr. Court, for city administrator's comments.
Just a couple of items tonight. First, to let you know that Grant Weed will not be here on April 2nd. He's headed into surgery for a new hip, and wish him all the best on that surgery. But I understand he's getting the most out of the last week of his old hip by going skiing. So. And second of all, one of the items you passed in the consent agenda today or tonight was to set a public meeting on your idea to suspend the standing committee meetings for May or for April, May, and June. And when the staff got together and discussed, I don't want to discuss this tonight because this is for discussion at the next meeting, but I wanted to throw out for you to consider over the next 2 weeks before April 2nd the possibility that the regular workshop meeting would be on the fourth Wednesday in the late afternoon, from 3 to 5, 3 to 5:30, somewhere in there. So that's the staff's recommendation. So I wanted to get that date out to you so you could think about it as a possible date. And that concludes my comments tonight.
This time we'll turn to City Council.
Mr. Mayor, what time did he say? I'm sorry, I didn't write that down.
Councilmember Munz wishes for you to clarify.
The fourth Wednesday from 3 to 5 or 3 to 5:30. I think there was some doubt about whether it would be a 2-hour meeting or a 2.5-hour meeting. So
Thank you, Mayor.
Councilmember comments, starting off with Mayor Pro Tem Danny Pagal.
I don't have anything. Thank you.
Councilmember Campbell.
Thank you. I have two things. First, I'd like to apologize for my outburst. I try to maintain control and I lost it. As high as I'm apologizing, I'm sorry. Second thing is I'm going to say this was an honor, but it didn't feel like an honor. Today I had the honor of being invited, as did the rest of the council, to the memorial service for the 3 heroes that died in the airplane crash over in Harrington. The place was packed. I don't know if you've ever been to the base, to this particular building, but it's the indoor airplane wash building they have. I don't know how many people were there, but standing room only all over the place. The speakers were great. They said some good things. They really honored these three people. The families, I don't know, 25 or 30, maybe 40 people who were from out of town who were part of their family. I think the base did a good job of sending them off, albeit as difficult and as hard as it was. To be honest with you, there were several places in the thing. As a retired sailor, I was crying. It was very, very touching. But they did a good job, and the three of them have been sent off in good honor. Thank you.
Councilmember Bromberg.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, I'd like to also echo what Mr. Campbell just said. It was a touching moment, and it was very difficult to see the families come in there and to read the bios of those aviators. They're without a doubt cream of the crop in all respect. It is a sad thing for this community. On a better note, we had a very successful meeting with the Pentagon just this last week with Mayor Dudley. He ran a good show with them. I think the Pentagon, the Navy got the idea what our priorities were, and I'm sure he'll speak more in detail about that when he speaks. And we also had a very successful session with the National League of Cities. It's probably this particular session and the classes that were offered were probably the most rewarding for me of just about every type of seminar related to city work that I have attended. So I felt that in my heart, the city got their money's worth by us going back there. Thank you.
Councilmember Munns.
Just a reminder, the Public Safety Committee meeting is this Thursday in this room from 3:30 to 5. And also want to say, Mayor, you did a very fine job. And I think the reception we got on the Hill and in the Pentagon shows the effort that the city task force has done for the last 22 visits and where we're at. And what they all echoed was the unique environment in which we live and the intercooperation between the military and our city. And it showed today in the memorial service. When you are stationed, as we were, far away from your home, mine was San Antonio, your neighbors become your aunt and uncles to your kids. And whether it's good or bad, they go see aunt and uncle next door, Joe and Harriet, or whatever. But it's uniquely Woodby. And the outpouring of help and love, and these people affected are in your church, they're your neighbors, they're the Safeway clerk. We're all effective, and it's a blessing to be part of this community and to know that when something goes wrong or very right, we step up to the plate and we extend our hand and we love each other. And I just want to say thank you to the community. It's an honor to live here.
Thank you, Councilmember Munns. Councilmember Severance.
Thank you, Mayor. I was in attendance at the ceremony today, and I just have the same kind of feeling that has already been expressed, so I won't go into that again. And that's really all I have.
Councilmember Eisen.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Campbell said there were points during the memorial service this morning where he cried. Poor Bob had to listen to me sniffle into my handkerchief for about an hour solid. I apologize. It was heartbreaking. The last time I was in that hangar, it was for a homecoming, and it was the most joyous thing I had ever experienced. Today was a real sharp contrast to that. And it is at times like these that our relationship with the community and the military is so important. So I'll be posting some things on Facebook for the community, for things that you can do for VAQ 129 and the families of the aviators. So stay posted for that, because I know that we all want to do something, but we're not sure what. So I'll do some research there. And I have a couple things that I'd like to ask staff to bring forward, whether via a special meeting or a council meeting. I'd like to see what we can do, even though we've been making great time of late, to streamline the council meetings. Maybe we could have a short special meeting to kind of revise the agenda, just little things that take up time, like the roll call and things when we can see who's here. So just, I have a couple suggestions, so if that's something we could talk about, that'd be great. Also, the Parks Code. I'd like to take a look at that. With the summer coming up, I'd like us to take a look at allowing busker licenses for musicians or people selling crafts or equipment rentals. And I'd also like us to look at allowing alcohol for major events on a case-by-case basis inside parks. I think that would benefit things like the marathon and race week and the car shows and things like that. So just look into the future and trying to prioritize. That's all I have for tonight. Thanks.
Councilmember Sevadius.
Thank you. I too would like to express my appreciation for our military. As the husband of a naval officer, when my wife was active duty, you kind of take it for granted that the Navy's there, they do what they're supposed to do, and all is going to go well. But it's days like today when you remember that things don't always go well. And so I appreciate those people that put their lives on the line, regardless of rank, all the way up. And I'd also like to express the gratitude for the city for being able to go to the DC trip into the Pentagon. Ms. Munns mentions it so quickly you don't even realize what she's saying, but for 22 years, the city has gone back there and made their case to preserve that relationship between NAS Whidbey Island and the city of Oak Harbor. And it's an impressive statistic, and it was well recognized at the Pentagon. And so it was a great conference. Appreciate the opportunity to learn, to bring some of those ideas back, and to put them to work here for the city. Thank you.
Under Mayor's comments, I do think that the trip back to Washington, D.C. was successful. It's amazing to walk into the different offices at the many different admirals that we got together with, and they know who we are, they're well briefed, they know our priorities, our concerns. They greet us with open arms, and as they continue to see us year in and year out, they're getting to know us more and more. And we had great meetings, not only at the Pentagon on Thursday, but prior to that, on Wednesday, we were able to meet with Senator Maria Cantwell, as well as staff at Senator Patty Murray's office, as well as we got together with Representative Rick Larson. And so we had very productive meetings in Capitol Hill, and we're already looking forward to next year. That being said, hearts go out, and condolences and sympathy go out to the families of those that lost their lives last Monday. A week ago Monday, Lieutenant Commander Alan Patterson, Lieutenant Valerie Delaney, and Lieutenant Junior Grade William McIlvain III. We've got the sounds of freedom that continue to we hear on a daily basis, and rarely do we ever think about what could happen. But meanwhile, they continue to put themselves in harm's way, whether they're deployed over hostile territory or they're doing training runs in eastern Washington. And I thank them for their service, and they're truly heroes. Last note, City Council obviously expressed a strong desire to have a city attorney, and we've struggled to find candidates to bring forward so that council can confirm a city attorney. In fact, it was a year ago that City Council wanted to change the rules and wanted to make sure that the City Council got to weigh in and confirm whoever the mayor brought forward as confirmation. And so, before it was automatic.
I don't remember that.
And so, that being said, what we see this evening is, if we have two top candidates, if the mayor doesn't bring forward city council's choice, we're not going to confirm that individual. Looking back over the past year, we've had changes. We have confirmed a fire chief that's doing a phenomenal job in our fire department. Was he a fire chief before? No. But the morale is phenomenal at our fire department, and that was a great confirmation. Our police chief, in this case, he was one of two top candidates. Our police chief wasn't a police chief before, but he was a great recommendation, and the city council confirmed him. And the amount of activity that's happening at our police department so that our citizens are safer, my hat goes off to Police Chief Green. Our city administrator, Dr. Court, wasn't a city administrator before, but communicates extremely well, well organized, and is doing a phenomenal job as this city's city administrator. He truly loves our community and is doing a great job. We're putting together a great team here, and we had the opportunity to add to that this evening. I'm disappointed that we weren't able to confirm our city attorney, and due to the concern in reference to bringing him up to speed, that time to bring him up to speed is going to be small in comparison to trying to find another candidate to bring them forward. Don't assume that just because you did not confirm the mayor's choice that we are now going to resurrect the other candidate. That being said, I look forward to working with Grant Weed going forward. Obviously, we've got another contract that we'll have to approve with Mr. Grant Weed's firm on April 16th. But I know we're in great hands with Mr. Grant Weed, but City Council had an opportunity to confirm and have a permanent city attorney, and the learning curve would not have taken that long, and we would have been in good hands with Mr. Boughton, and I apologize to him for that lack of confirmation. That being said, I would entertain a motion to adjourn. Got a motion to adjourn, a second?
Second.
And a second. All those in favor of adjourning signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? We're adjourned.